She answered the call in Russian. Mafia boss froze, then whispered, "She's not just a waitress." The phone rang at the exact moment Alara stepped past table 7. Konrad Drakov didn't blink. He heard it. A tone shift. A pause that didn't belong. She didn't stop walking. Didn't break character. But something in her voice wasn't the voice he'd been hearing the past 3 weeks. It came low, controlled, and then, clear Russian. "Da, ya skazala tebe ne zvonit syuda." Konrad's blood cooled instantly. He stood. Table 7 rocked slightly as his hand pushed off. Knife untouched. Steak cold. Eyes locked on the back corridor where she disappeared with the phone still in her hand. Alara Wynn. 25. Quiet. Polite. A face people overlooked unless they were paying close attention. Konrad had been paying attention. She moved like someone trained to avoid mistakes. She was always early, always quiet, always distant. He thought she was hiding from debt. Maybe a bad boyfriend. Maybe the kind of life women tried to escape by changing states. He didn't think bratva. Until now. He walked fast but silent, the floor absorbing the tension of each step. A passing server looked his way, opened her mouth to speak, then turned around without a word. That's what people did when Konrad Drakov walked towards something. They got out of his way. At the back hallway, kitchen steam fogged the windows. It was warm, loud, full of sharp movements, yet all of it faded when he reached the staff exit door. She was right there, back turned. Phone pressed close to her ear. He caught the last whisper of her voice as she ended the call. Still Russian. She lowered the phone and exhaled like her ribs had been locked. Then she froze. His voice hit the space behind her shoulder like an unspoken order. "You're not just a waitress, are you?" She didn't scream, didn't turn around right away. She knew better than to react. But Konrad saw her right hand flinch. He stepped closer, stopping just short of closing the distance. "You speak Russian." She turned slowly. "You do too." The air between them cracked with tension. Konrad kept his hands down, his eyes on hers. Calm, dead steady. "Who were you talking to?" "I said not to come for me here. That's not an answer. And you're not my boss." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She knew exactly what kind of man he was now. And she still didn't cower. "Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is." Konrad looked at her face like it held a map. She was scared, but not of him. "You're running from something," he said. "No," she lied. "Badly." "You know what makes me nervous?" he asked. She didn't respond. When people lie like they've done it their whole lives. Alara turned her shoulder as if to leave. He didn't block her. He simply added, "You're lucky I was the one who heard that." That stopped her again. She looked back, eyes sharp. "What do you want from me?" Konrad tilted his head slightly. "The truth, I don't owe you that. Maybe not now. But when whoever that call was from shows up at your front door, you'll wish I knew everything." She tensed. "You don't know anything about me. I know your name, I know your hours. I know you don't drink the free wine during staff meetings. I know you leave by the side door, and you always scan both directions before you cross the street." She blinked. "I've watched you longer than you think." "Why?" Konrad paused, then said plainly, "Because you're the only person who looked me in the eye and didn't ask for anything." Ilara's lips parted slightly. She didn't respond. He stepped back, enough to make her feel she could move. "You've got a choice, Alara," he said. "Walk out that door and pretend I don't know what I know. Or tell me now before your secrets pull someone else into danger." She looked toward the exit. Konrad expected her to leave. Instead, she asked, "Do you believe people can have second lives?" His eyes didn't move. "Not in Chicago." She opened the door and stepped into the cold night. Konrad didn't follow. He already knew this wasn't over. The moment the door closed behind her, he turned toward his man waiting near the entrance. Jaron saw the look. He followed. Konrad stepped out into the wind, scanning the sidewalk. Alara was already halfway down the block, coat tight around her body, phone clutched like a loaded weapon. She didn't look back. "Tail her," Conrad said without breaking stride. No contact. I want to know where she sleeps, who she calls, how many locks on her door. Jaren nodded once and moved into traffic, blending into the crowd. Conrad pulled his phone from his jacket. One name, one message. Pull her file. Fast. Anything with Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. Father. Known associates. Background. Quiet employers. Russian connections. He slipped the phone away and looked up at the black sky. A cold gust ran along the edge of the building, the kind that didn't just chill the skin, it pressed into the bones. She spoke Russian, fluent, controlled, unshaken. The kind of Russian you didn't learn in school but in rooms with no windows and too many locks. She wasn't some girl who moved here for a fresh start. She was trained, shaped, and the question that hit hardest wasn't what she said on that call, it was who was listening on the other end. Back inside the restaurant, the music hadn't stopped. The air smelled of truffle oil and dry-aged beef. The rich kept talking about mergers and investments, unaware that something just shifted under their feet. Conrad walked past his untouched plate, straight to the back corridor. The chef glanced at him but looked away just as fast. Everyone in Crown Meridian knew what silence cost. In the hallway, he stopped by the staff board. There it was, her name on the weekly shift list. Alara Wynn, no middle name, no emergency contact, no previous employment listed. He stared at it for a long second. Then he turned, walked back into the street, and got into his car. 2 hours later, Ilara stood in her kitchen, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. Tea long cold. Her eyes stared past the window, down into the alley where her fire escape ended in rust. The lights were off. She always kept them off after 10. No need to advertise she was home. She moved through the apartment with practiced stillness. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. Her father taught her to leave no trace. Her mother taught her how to smile while lying. Both lessons were the reason she was still breathing. The phone buzzed. Again, unknown number. She didn't answer. Instead, she powered it off and removed the SIM. She'd swap it tomorrow. A new number again. As she placed the phone on the counter, her hands trembled slightly. He heard her. Konrad Drakov had been there. Behind her. Close. His voice had wrapped around her like a hand pressed to the back of her neck. Not aggressive. Not gentle. Just certain. And he didn't ask twice. That was what scared her. He was the kind of man who didn't ask unless he already knew. Something. She walked to the mirror in the hallway and stared at her reflection. She didn't recognize her own face. Not the woman in Chicago. Not the server. Not the one who once packed her bags in Brooklyn and said she'd start over. That version was cracking. One line at a time. Back in a private high-rise garage near the river, Conrad's elevator opened, directly into a dark office with floor-to-ceiling glass walls. The city stretched around him like a chessboard. Every light a player, every shadow a threat. He poured one glass of bourbon and didn't touch it. Jaren called 5 minutes later. She lives in Logan Square, second floor, no cameras. 2 locks, 1 bolt. Doesn't match the kind of girl you'd expect in this part of town. Friends? None I've seen. No regulars. No guests. She walks alone, comes home alone. Eyes on the windows? She keeps M covered. Good. Keep your distance. Don't scare her. I want to see how long she acts normal. Jaren exhaled through the line. Boss, you think she's a threat? Conrad turned slowly toward the window. No, he said. I think someone else is. Alara lay on her mattress, the springs digging into her side, but her eyes never closed. The phone was gone. The call was over, but the voice she heard last before the line cut still echoed. You shouldn't have left. She pressed her hand to her chest. Her heartbeat was too fast, too loud. She whispered under her breath like a prayer. Don't find me. She didn't know if she meant her father or Konrad Drakov. What happens when your new life collides with the one you tried to bury? Have you ever kept a secret so deep that even your breath feels dangerous? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to see what happens next, like, share, and subscribe. Alara Wynne learned early that silence wasn't just polite. It was survival. The neighborhood kids called it Little Odessa. But it wasn't little at all. It had the noise of a whole country packed into a few blocks of Brooklyn. Men sat on crates playing cards. Mothers barked in Russian as they dragged groceries up 3 flights of cracked stairs. Teen boys talked too loud and watched too close. And Oleg Wynne stood at the center of it like he owned the pavement. Her father wasn't a big man, but when he walked into a room, voices lowered. When he looked at someone, they stopped moving. He wore cheap coats and drove quiet cars. But he never had to ask twice. Alara used to wait for him by the window. His shoes would land heavy on the stairwell at exactly 9:15 p.m. Then the deadbolt would slide, the door would open, and the air in the apartment would shift. Some nights he brought food. Some nights he brought blood on his sleeves. He never explained either. She stopped asking when she turned 10. Her mother, Irina, was the kind of woman who kept the kettle warm and her voice low. She read books in Russian and cleaned everything twice. Her smiles never reached her eyes, but she held Alara's hand during storms. Then the sickness came. Irina faded by inches. When she died, Alara was 16, and the apartment turned cold even when the heat worked. That was when Oleg changed. No more soft rules. No more explanations. He started locking his office, started whispering on the phone, started treating Alara like a stranger who knew too much. She learned to keep her steps light and her questions lighter. That winter, she heard him on the phone, yelling at someone in Russian. "Tell him I don't care about the deal. If he steps foot on my block again, I'll bury him." She never forgot that line. Not because of the words, because of the silence that followed. The kind of silence that meant someone had agreed to something ugly. When Alara turned 20, she packed a bag one morning, left a note on the kitchen counter. No goodbye. No warning. Just 2 words, "I'm done." She took a bus out of New York with $62, 3 resumes, and a name that could get her killed if she ended up in the wrong place. Chicago felt big enough to disappear in. She worked at a small market in South Shore, then a laundromat in West Lawn. No one asked about her past. That's why she stayed. She saved every tip. She said little. She never told anyone her father's name. And when she landed the job at Crown Meridian, she almost didn't take it. The place was too fancy, too visible, too close to people who knew people who knew people. But they paid well. And the manager liked her. "Quiet, reliable," he said during the second interview. "Don't take dumb risks." She nodded. She hadn't taken one in years. Her studio apartment wasn't much. Just a twin mattress on the floor, a wooden crate as a nightstand, and blackout curtains that never opened. But it was hers. No locked doors. No shouting at midnight. No silence that suffocated. Still, she never slept more than 4 hours a night. Some habits don't break. She didn't tea drink, didn't date, didn't keep pictures on her phone. She changed her number every 3 months. And once a week, she stood under the shower for 20 minutes straight, letting the water drown the memory of one night she could never erase. The night she saw her father beat a man so hard he stopped moving. She was 14. She'd come home early from school and walked into the hallway as the door opened. Her father didn't know she was home. He dragged the man in by the collar. Blood covered his mouth. His legs didn't work. Oleg hit him again. And again. Alara backed away before she could scream. She hid in the bedroom closet for hours. She never told anyone. She never spoke to her father about it. But she remembered the sound his boots made against the man's ribs. Years later, on a quiet Thursday night in Chicago, her phone lit up while she stood outside the restaurant during break. Unknown number. She froze. The air around her shifted. She looked both ways. No cars. No footsteps. Her thumb hovered over the red button. Then the screen changed. Not a call. A message. Only a few words. "Your silence won't protect you this time." She didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Didn't move. The message disappeared before she could screenshot it. She stared at the blank screen. Then slowly turned and walked back into the restaurant, heart pounding, throat dry. Something was coming. And this time she wouldn't see it first. Alara didn't sleep that night. She lay on her side, fully dressed, eyes on the red numbers blinking from the stove clock. Every sound outside made her stiffen. Footsteps, tires, the creak of a metal gate. Each one held weight it didn't have the day before. At 4:17 a.m. she stood, unplugged the router, packed a small duffel, and moved through the apartment like she'd rehearsed it. Because she had. 10 minutes later she was out the back stairwell. No lights. No sound. Nothing but her boots on the metal grates as she descended. By sunrise, she was walking near Pulaski, keeping close to glass windows and alley paths. Places with exits. Shadows with sightlines. She had one goal: buy a burner. Inside a corner store with a broken bell, she kept her hoodie up. Paid in cash. Used a false name. The man behind the counter didn't ask questions. She left with a new number. Another chance. But the message still pulsed behind her ribs. Your silence won't protect you this time. She didn't recognize the number. But that didn't matter. It was the words that hit hardest, because someone out there wasn't guessing. They knew who she was, where she worked, and how to get inside her head. Later that afternoon, as she moved through her shift like nothing was wrong, she dropped a teacup for the first time since she started at Crown Meridian. It shattered. Every table went quiet for a second. Ilara crouched to pick up the pieces, hands steady, breath controlled, but her eyes flicked toward the entrance. Konrad Drakov had walked in, alone, like always, but this time he didn't look at his table. He looked straight at her. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds, then stood and walked away without a word. She didn't have the strength to ask if he'd followed her the night before. She didn't want to know, because part of her hoped he had. That night she sat on her fire escape with a cup of weak tea and stared at the buildings around her. Brick. Cold. Familiar. Chicago was the city she picked because it didn't care who you were. You could disappear here, unless someone made it their job to find you. She thought of her father, of the man she hadn't seen in 5 years, of the time she watched him speak to another man who ended up dead the next week. Shot. Twice behind a deli near Neptune Avenue. No one ever connected it to Oleg. No one ever would. Oleg Wynn didn't leave fingerprints, but he did leave warnings, and now someone else was sending them. She hated how much her hands shook. She hated how fast her heart still beat at shadows. She hated how she wasn't the woman she'd built herself into. Someone invisible, untouchable, in control. Now she was a target again, because she answered one call. In the morning, a package waited outside her door. No label, no name, just black wrapping and a red string. She picked it up carefully, turned it over. It was too light to be dangerous, but still, her legs locked as she brought it inside. She set it on the kitchen counter and unwrapped it slow. Inside, she found one item. A white flash drive. No note. No instructions. She stared at it for a long time, then walked over to the drawer under the sink, pulled out her old laptop, and turned off the Wi-Fi before plugging the drive in. The folder popped up fast. It was titled, Moscow. She clicked once. Inside were 5 photos. The first was a picture of her as a child, no older than 8, standing next to her father on the steps of an old church in Brighton Beach. The second, her mother, sitting on a bench reading to her. The third, her father, shaking hands with a man she recognized but hadn't seen in years. Viktor Kashin, a Bratva captain known for laundering money through bakeries and construction firms. The fourth, a news clipping about Viktor's murder in Moscow 3 years ago. Shot 5 times in his apartment. The fifth, her own employee photo from Crown Meridian. At the bottom, a typed line of text appeared. There are no new lives, Ilara, just delayed consequences. She slammed the laptop shut. Her lungs couldn't pull in air fast. Enough. This wasn't just someone guessing. This was personal. She backed into the wall, eyes burning. Then her phone buzzed again, on the new number. No caller ID, just one line. We'll be seeing you soon. Konrad Drakov learned early that power didn't show up with a suit or a title. It showed up when people moved out of your way without you asking. He was 10 the first time someone called him boss. A bag of groceries had been stolen from his mother's hand by 2 older boys. While she screamed at the corner, Conrad tracked them through alleys, threw a brick, and broke one kid's shoulder. They didn't come back, neither did the groceries. But the look on his mother's face when she saw them limping the next day, she never asked what he did. She just nodded. That was the first lesson. Handle it yourself. No one's coming to save you. By 14, he'd learned how to lock a car without keys. By 15, he was running errands for the man who ran 2 blocks of South Side businesses, cash only, no questions. By 18, Conrad ran that man out of town. No blood, no fight. Conrad used silence the way others used bullets. When people asked how he built his empire, they never liked the answer. Slowly and without mercy. He didn't chase attention. He dressed clean, not loud. He invested in real estate, not nightclubs. He used LLCs, offshore accounts, and enough lawyers to pass IRS audits 3 years in a row. He was organized, respected, feared, and absolutely alone. Women came and went. They liked the way he moved, the way he owned a room without needing to speak. They liked the aura, the lifestyle, the penthouse views and 7-digit wire transfers. He gave them what they wanted for a while, until they asked for too much. Conrad never trusted easily, and after one betrayal at 26, he stopped trying altogether. Her name was Nia. She said all the right things, watched his temper, made herself seem like peace in a violent world. But she sold him out for money. The hit almost worked. He took a bullet to the side, missed the artery by an inch. She disappeared before his men could catch her. Since then, he kept his circle tight. Bare bones. No risks. No emotion. Then Ilara walked into Crown Meridian and told him he looked tired. It was the softest sentence, thrown in like it meant nothing. But it stunned him. Nobody talked to him like that, not even his second in command. People asked him what he wanted, not how he was. He'd stared at her longer than he meant to, then nodded once, barely, didn't speak, and left a $100 bill for a $3 tea. The next time he came in, she didn't mention it, didn't smile extra, didn't act like she knew him. She just served him again. Quick, respectful, but never afraid. Conrad started watching. He timed her routes through the room, noted how she avoided certain tables, noted how she only took the elevator if no one else was in it. She scanned exits, kept her back to walls, and only ever sat with her back against glass when she was forced to. She wasn't a normal girl. He saw it early, but he told himself she was probably just cautious, probably just a product of a hard city, until she answered that call. Now she was in his head. Conrad stared out the window of his penthouse, phone at his ear. The voice on the other end, gravel, thick and calm, waited. "Dig into her, Conrad," said. "What am I looking for?" Brighton Beach, Russian name, father's details if possible, immigration records, any sealed juvenile cases, got it. And Leon. Yeah? Discretion. Leon didn't ask why, just said, "Give me 12 hours. Conrad ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. The lights of Chicago blinked below, the city pulsing with the kind of secrets people paid millions to keep buried. He took a breath, but it didn't steady him. Ilara Wynne had unraveled something in his mind. He didn't like it, because now he needed to know everything. Back at Crown Meridian, Ilara wiped down her station, her fingers moving out of habit. Her mind, though, was spinning. She knew he was watching. She felt it again. Those eyes, studying and almost aware, like he knew more than she wanted him to. She finished her shift, said a quiet goodnight, and stepped out into the alley behind the restaurant. Conrad's car wasn't there, but she didn't relax. She kept her hand close to her pepper spray until she turned the first corner. Something had shifted, and she wasn't sure if he was the threat or the protection. The file came through at 2:06 a.m. Jaron never missed a deadline. Conrad sat at his desk, black coffee untouched, shirt sleeves rolled up. The city outside his window blurred into darkness. His laptop screen glowed cold. One folder, 3 subfolders, dozens of files. He clicked the first one. It was a scanned school record. Name, Alara, the first win, place of birth, Brooklyn, New York school. P.S. 127, Brighton Beach. Nothing jumped out. Second file, more recent. An HR sheet from Crown Meridian. Basic. No emergency contacts. Address matched the one Jaren had traced. Still, nothing loud. But Conrad wasn't looking for loud. He clicked deeper. There it was. A medical record from when she was 16. The report was brief. Injuries consistent with physical trauma. Subject refused to name the assailant. No charges filed. Case closed. His jaw tensed. Then came a newspaper article. Dated 7 years ago. Brooklyn man questioned in organized crime probe. No charges filed. The photo was grainy, but the man in the center was sharp enough. Conrad leaned closer. Oleg Wynn, her father. Next to him, barely visible, stood a younger Alara, looking at the ground. The next photo, from a different source, showed Oleg shaking hands with Rurik Malin. Conrad cursed under his breath. This was deeper than family trouble. This was bloodline legacy. He sat back, eyes never leaving the screen. She had lied by omission. But now he understood why. Her movements, her cold stares, her distance from everything and everyone. It wasn't just trauma, it was training. She'd been raised in something she didn't choose, and now she was trying to unchoose it. But the world didn't work that way. You don't just walk away from Bratva. Even Conrad, with all his power, didn't tread carelessly near Russian cells. They moved differently. They buried their weak. They sacrificed their own. And Alara, she was a loose end. Someone wanted her tied, off, or used. He grabbed his phone and hit call. Jaren answered on the second ring. She's not who we thought, Conrad said flatly. You saw the Rurik photos? Yeah. Her father was deeper in than most knew. The feds tried to flip him. He refused, went dark. Nobody's seen him in years. Word is he vanished after double, crossing someone high up. Conrad stood, pacing now. She's not in hiding from cops, he said. She's hiding from her own blood. She changed names? No, she kept it. That tells me she's either brave or done. Running. Leon waited a beat. You think she's in danger? Conrad didn't answer immediately. Then, if she's not already, she will be. 3 hours later, Alara woke to the sound of tapping. Not loud, just steady. She sat up, heartbeat climbing. The sun hadn't broken through yet. Her clock read 5:11 a.m. Another tap, not on the window, on the door. She moved slowly, grabbed the knife from under her pillow. Another tap, soft, almost like a warning. She didn't call out. Instead, she moved toward the door, pressing her back to the wall. Quiet, still. The tap stopped. She waited. Then, under the door, a folded slip of paper slid through. No footsteps, no retreating echo. She waited 5 full minutes before picking it up. One sentence was printed in bold block letters. You were seen with him. That was a mistake. Alara sat on the floor for a long time. That sentence kept looping. They were watching. And now, because Conrad had looked at her 1 second too long, she was in deeper. She didn't know if she should run or go to him. She hated both options, because both meant giving someone else power over her choices, and she'd fought too hard to live quietly. That night, Conrad returned to Crown Meridian. Alara wasn't working. He asked the manager where she was. The man shrugged, called off, didn't say why. Conrad nodded once, walked to his usual table, didn't sit. He pulled out his phone and texted Jaren. Find out if her apartment has movement tonight. If not, she's gone. He looked around the restaurant one last time, and for the first time in a long time he felt something unfamiliar. Regret. Because he should have acted sooner. Now he wasn't sure if she'd make it through the week. Ilara's coat barely held back the wind as she tuned onto the narrow side street near her apartment. The grocery bag clutched to her chest felt heavier than it was one loaf of bread, a bottle of water, and a packet of tea. She hadn't planned to walk. but something told her not to wait for the bus tonight. Her shoes hit the pavement in a quick, steady rhythm. She kept her hood up, eyes forward. That block on the left always made her uneasy. The alley between the closed diner and the old laundromat was too quiet. No lights, just shadow. She passed it, fast, then heard it, a soft roll of tires behind her. She didn't look, didn't break stride. Another sound, a door unlatching. She tightened her grip on the bag. Half a second later, the slam of the car door shattered the quiet. Miss, she ran, but it was too late. Two men rushed her from behind. One grabbed her arm. The other tried to wrap a cloth around her face. She twisted hard, dropping the bag. The bread hit the sidewalk, bounced. She screamed, but a hand covered her mouth before the sound left her lips. Her knee shot up, connected with someone's thigh. The man growled. She elbowed again. This time, she caught his side. He staggered. The second man tightened his grip and whispered sharp Russian words into her ear. Tvoy otets, kokche tebia domoy. Your father wants you home. Panic turned into rage. She bent low and stomped the side of his foot. He cursed. She used the second of space to twist, break loose, and run. Her legs were already burning. Cold air tore down her throat. Her scarf flapped behind her like a flag screaming she was prey. She didn't look back, didn't need to. They were chasing. She felt them. She pushed past the stop sign, around a blue sedan, and down the next block. Cars honked. She ignored them. 2 more blocks to Crown. Meridian. She hadn't planned to go back. But the lights, the people. Conrad. She just needed him to see her. The restaurant's glow spilled into the street. Warm. Familiar. Alive. Her boots slipped once, wet concrete, but she caught herself and ran harder. She barreled through the glass doors, chest first. Tables turned. Chairs scraped. Forks froze in midair. She stumbled inside, then dropped to her knees. She gasped, trying to speak. Couldn't, then tried again. A wheeze. They found me. Her voice broke apart like her knees. Conrad was already moving. He'd seen the SUV speed past 5 seconds before she burst in. He knew that model. He knew the driver. The second he saw Alara hit the floor, he didn't wait. He was at her side, scooping her into his arms before anyone else could move. Call Jaren, he snapped toward the host. No one questioned. Him. No one breathed. Alara clung to his coat. Her face was cold. Her hands trembled against his chest. He didn't ask questions. He carried her out the back, through the kitchen, past the staff hallway, and into the alley. The back door slammed behind him. His car was already running. Jaren stood beside it, jaw clenched. They came for her? He asked. Conrad nodded once. Jaren opened the door fast. Conrad slid Alara into the back seat, then got in after her. Drive, he said. Jaren didn't ask where. They all knew where to go. Inside the car, Alara's breath still came in gasps. She curled into herself, legs tucked, body tight like she could disappear into the leather seats. Conrad sat beside her, his arm across the backrest, watching the streets flash past. Who are they? He asked. Her eyes stayed, shut. My father's men. You're sure? She nodded. They spoke Russian. I heard. She looked at him now, eyes glassy. What happens next? Conrad's stare didn't move from the window. They're going to regret touching you. She shook her head slowly. No, you don't understand. If they found me, they won't stop. Neither will I. The way he said it, quiet, low, without hesitation, made her stomach twist. He wasn't just saying it, he meant it. But Alara wasn't convinced she deserved to be protected. Not from this. Not from the kind of life that raised her in secrets and spit her out halfway across the country. She closed her eyes again, this time not from fear, but from exhaustion. The kind that only shows up when you realize running is no longer an option. Alara didn't remember falling asleep. 1 second she was watching the streetlights streak past the car window. The next, quiet, warmth, a soft couch beneath her, thick blankets pulled over her body. She blinked at the ceiling. Soft light, no noise, safe. She sat up fast. Pain rushed to her ribs. A low grunt escaped before she could stop it. That's when she noticed him. Conrad, sitting in the armchair beside her. Coat off, sleeves rolled, a cup of untouched coffee in his hands. He didn't speak, just watched her. Calm, sharp. She pulled the blanket tighter. "This your place?" she asked, her voice cracking. "No." She scanned the room. Tall windows, brick walls, plants in corners. Nothing about it said mafia boss. Everything about it said hidden. "I didn't want to bring you somewhere predictable," he said. Her jaw clenched. "So, now, you're hiding me? You think those men last night were here to scare you?" "I know who sent them." Conrad leaned forward slightly. "Your father." She nodded once. "I heard what he said. Your father wants you home." That wasn't a warning. That was an order. Alara's throat tightened. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "I never wanted anything from him." Conrad studied her. "Then tell me what he is." Her hands gripped the blanket. "He's not a businessman. He's not a restaurant owner. He's not any of the things he told people." She looked up, finally meeting his eyes. "He's Bratva. He's been Bratva my whole life." Conrad didn't move, didn't react, but every part of him clicked into place. "I left when I turned 20, she continued. "No goodbyes, no explanations. I just left. You think that was enough?" "No," she whispered. "I hoped it was." Silence stretched between them. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy, real. "I hated the way we lived," she said. "The phones that were never on record, the cash payments, the sudden trips at 2 a.m., the locked briefcases, the guns I wasn't supposed to see." She wiped her face. "I hated his rules. I hated being afraid of the doorbell. I hated hearing my mom cry when she thought I was asleep." Conrad's jaw shifted, but he said nothing. "She died, and everything changed. He stopped pretending to be normal. He wanted me to learn, to become what he was, and I couldn't. So you ran. I erased myself. Or I thought I did." Conrad stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured water into a glass. He returned, placed it gently on the table beside her. "You should have told me the night I heard you speak Russian." "I didn't know you," she said. "You know me now." She looked at him for a beat, then nodded. He sat again. "Your father, is he working with anyone?" Alara shook her head. "I don't know. I haven't heard from him in years." "Then who sent the men?" "I thought it was him. But—" She hesitated. There was something off. That wasn't how he used to do things. Conrad raised an eyebrow. He was calculated, subtle. When he wanted something, you never knew until it was already done. These men were messy, loud, sloppy, rushed. If they were his, something's changed. Conrad rubbed his hand over his chin. Or they weren't his at all. But he didn't say that. Yet, later, while Alara sat on the balcony wrapped in a sweater that wasn't hers, Conrad made a call. Jaren answered fast. "We ID the SUV. Stolen 2 weeks ago, plates swapped. We're running what we can. Facial? Blurry. But one match, Russian enforcer named Mikhail Kovac, ties to Oleg Win, so it is him. Could be. But Kovac also worked with someone else before, Rurik, Malin. Conrad still, that name hadn't been mentioned in years." Jaren's voice dropped. "If Rurik's involved—" "I know," Conrad said. He hung up. Alara stood near the balcony rail, eyes closed, letting the air hit her face. She needed to feel something real. Conrad joined her. "He's not going to stop, is he?" "No," he said. She turned to face him. "I don't want to pull you into this. You already did." She opened her mouth, stopped, closed it. I don't want anyone else hurt because of me. Conrad stepped closer. You didn't ask for this. I was born into it. You chose something different. That's what matters. She looked away. Does it? He didn't answer with words, just stood beside her, like a wall she didn't have to lean against, but could. Sometimes protection doesn't look like a rescue. Sometimes it looks like someone simply refusing to leave when things get ugly. Would you let someone stand between you and your past? Let us know in the comments. And if you're with us so far, like, share, and subscribe because the storm's just starting. Alara opened her eyes to warm light pouring through floor, to ceiling windows. Her breath caught. The ceiling above her was smooth concrete. The room silent, her blanket soft, clean. This wasn't her apartment. She sat up slow. A gray sweater slid off her shoulder. It wasn't hers either. She blinked hard, looking around. Dark wood floors. A low, slung couch. No clutter. No noise. One giant wall of glass showing the Chicago skyline. High up. Private. Safe. She swung her legs off the edge of the couch. Her boots were gone. Her ankles stung, but nothing was broken. The door across the room opened. Conrad stepped through, wearing a black shirt, sleeves pushed up, no coat. He didn't look surprised to see her awake. You're in my safe unit, he said. Nobody knows it exists but me and one other person. Alara's voice came out low. You moved me while I was sleeping? He didn't flinch. You needed rest. And silence. She looked at the window again. How high are we? 40. Second floor. She stood slowly. Her head didn't spin, but her legs weren't. Steady. Conrad walked past her and set a glass of water on the table. She didn't thank him, but she took it. He waited. You should ask me, she said finally. I don't want you to lie. I won't. He nodded once. Who are you really? Alara looked down at the water in her hands. My name is Alara Wynn. That part's real. And your father? She hesitated, then sat back, down. He's Bratva. Conrad sat in the chair across from her, silent. Alara looked up. He worked under Victor Cashin, ran deals through Brighton Beach. I don't know the full structure, I was a kid. But by the time I was 15, I knew more than I wanted to. Why Chicago? I needed to be where he wasn't. You thought that was enough? I hoped it was. She sipped the water. I used to think if I stayed quiet long enough, the past would forget me. It doesn't. No. It doesn't. Conrad leaned forward slightly. How long have you been off his radar? 5 years. Maybe more. No contact. No letters. No calls. No messages. Nothing until that night at the restaurant. Then he never stopped looking. She exhaled through her nose. I know. They sat in silence for a long moment. It wasn't tense. It was heavy. He taught me how to keep secrets, she said, but he never taught me what to do when someone finds them. You trust me now? I trust that you're not afraid of him. That made his lip twitch, almost a smirk. She added, and I trust that if I'd told you the truth earlier, you'd have walked away. No, Conrad said, steady. I would have been more careful. She watched him now, closely. Why help me? He stood and walked toward the window. Because someone like you doesn't run unless they were raised by worse. Alara sat back, the blanket still wrapped around her legs. But the cold wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was memory. It was what she hadn't said yet. Conrad stood by the window with his hands in his pockets, back straight, jaw set. He looked like a man who could carry a city on his shoulders and still sleep at night. But something about the way he wasn't speaking told her he was thinking too much. She finally asked, You ever dealt with Bratva before? Briefly, and I stayed breathing. Alara's lips pressed tight. They don't forget, she said. I don't need them to forget, he replied. I need them to hesitate. She pulled the blanket tighter and leaned forward. My father didn't just work for the Bratva. He made people disappear. He taught others how to do it. Taught me too, not directly, but by example. Conrad turned slightly, enough to face her. He ever make someone disappear that mattered? I don't know what mattered to him, she said, but I remember names, faces. Men who showed up at our door once and never came back. Conrad's brow lowered. And you? I stayed invisible. I made myself small, quiet. He thought it was obedience. It was strategy. She looked him dead in the eye. I didn't survive because of my father. I survived in spite of him. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, you weren't afraid of me because you've seen worse. It wasn't a question. She nodded once. The apartment fell silent again. Conrad turned back to the window, the city still wide open beneath them. He didn't need to say what was already running through his mind. If Alara's father had found her, others weren't far behind. And if Rurik Mullen was involved, Conrad clenched his jaw. Too many. Players. Too much. Heat. Bratva politics weren't like street-level power moves. There were alliances nobody talked about, blood debts older than birth, certificates, and money that came in from places with no flags. He had territory to protect, men to answer to, and now, her. He walked to the far side of the room and picked up his phone. His thumb hovered over a name, Leon. But he didn't hit call. He looked back at Alara. Her eyes were closed now, but she wasn't asleep. She was listening, breathing steady, waiting for whatever came next. He lowered the phone. Later that night, Conrad stood alone in the small kitchen with the light off. He didn't need it to see. The skyline blinked through the glass. Far below, Chicago kept moving. Cars, deals, sins. He spoke under his breath. A whisper no one else could hear. If she's Bratva's daughter, Chicago just became a war zone. The man sitting in the leather chair didn't blink as the flame touched the edge of the photo. It curled slow, blackened, turned to ash in his hand. Rurik Mullen watched it fall into the ceramic tray beside him, then leaned back with a quiet sigh. Across the room, two of his men stood by the window. The walls around them were solid stone. No windows, no natural light. The entire floor was underground. Chicago's surface buzzed above them, but here, time stayed still. He didn't speak for a while. Then in Russian he said, Oleg Wynn thinks distance is protection. One of the men nodded. Rurik stood. Not tall, not bulky. But no one ever mistook him for small. He was the kind of man who didn't raise his voice because it never needed to be raised. The room bent to his presence. I gave that man a seat at the table, he said, brushing soot from his fingers. He repaid me with silence. With cowardice. The second man shifted. He ran, sir. Took money. He didn't just take money, Rurik replied. He took memory, took weight, took trust. His tone didn't rise. It sharpened. And now he sends his daughter to hide in restaurants. To carry plates. He walked over to a file resting on the table. Unfolded it. A single photo clipped to the top. Alara Wynn. Taken from a camera inside Crown Meridian. She wasn't smiling. She never did. Rurik stared at it. She looks like her mother. Then, calmly, she'll do. Years earlier, Oleg Wynn had stood in this same room. The two men had shared a drink. Vodka. No ice. No toast. They'd agreed to a quiet deal. Launder funds through a string of fake consulting agencies. Oleg kept 20%. Rurik took the rest. It worked. Until it didn't. Rurik found out later through whispers in Brighton Beach that Oleg had opened a back channel in Moscow, redirecting funds into his own pocket. A betrayal. When Rurik confronted him, Oleg didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. He poured himself a drink, toasted nothing, and said, You wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't gotten greedy. Rurik didn't kill him, not because he didn't want to, because he wanted to. Wait, he wanted to take something more, and now he had it. Back in the present, Rurik flipped to the next page in the file. Work history, apartment location, security camera screenshots, bank account numbers. He tapped one line with his finger. This is her? Yes, sir. And she doesn't know we've found her. Not yet. Rurik closed the folder. Mark this. He pointed to the cover. Leverage. 3 blocks away, in a separate building wired with satellite silence and internal cameras, the order went out. A small team. Russian accents. No social media. No records. They didn't ask who she was. They only asked one question. Alive? Rurik nodded. For now, at that exact moment, Alara stood on the balcony of Conrad's safe unit, a cup of coffee in hand. She hadn't told him everything. She didn't know how, and part of her wondered if she was doing him a favor by staying quiet. But it was too late for that. She'd felt it in her bones when she saw that SUV. They weren't just trying to bring her back. They were hunting. Conrad walked up behind her. You didn't sleep. Neither did you. They didn't smile. Didn't pretend. I've got Leon pulling bank transfers linked to any Bratva movements, he said. If your father's name comes up, we'll know where the order came from. Alara sipped her coffee. It's not just my father. Conrad raised an eyebrow. There's someone worse. Conrad waited for her to continue, but Alara's eyes stayed fixed on the skyline. Her grip tightened around the warm cup. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but something raw pushed underneath it. My father had a partner, she said. Someone he owed. Someone he crossed. Conrad didn't move. He didn't rush her. Alara set the cup down and wrapped her arms around herself. His name was Rurik Malin. Conrad had heard the name plenty of times. Quiet conversations. Back rooms. Men who lowered their voices without realizing it. Rurik wasn't loud, but his actions were. People disappeared where he walked. Deals didn't end. They shifted. Entire crews vanished in one winter because he wanted a piece of the South Docks. Conrad knew him from a distance. He had hoped it would stay that way. Alara didn't look at Conrad as she explained. Rurik and my father built things together. Money, power, lines no one else touched. They were close, too close, which made the betrayal worse. Conrad leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Your father stole from him. He didn't just steal, she said quietly. He burned a bridge that was supposed to stand forever. Rurik lost money, lost territory, lost a man he trusted, and he blamed us. All of us. Conrad didn't need details. He already knew enough. Alara stared at the city like it might answer back. My father left New York the same night the deal broke. I didn't know what happened until weeks later. He never said it, but I saw it in the way he moved, in how he kept the curtains closed, in the way he never slept more than an hour at a time. You were a kid, Conrad said. I was old enough to understand fear. Her voice didn't crack, but her eyes did. Conrad looked at her longer than he meant to. You think Rurik sent the men last night? He asked. Yes, she whispered. He always said if my father ever crossed him, he'd collect through bloodline. Conrad didn't reply. He didn't trust himself to. Across the city, Rurik stood in a dim room lined with surveillance screens. His men spread photos over a steel table. Crown Meridian, Alara, her apartment building. Grainy footage, notes scribbled in Russian. He walked around the table with slow steps, one hand brushing across the images as if memorizing every detail. She works at the restaurant often? He asked. 6 days a week, one man replied. She leaves alone? Every night. Rurik stopped in front of a photo of Alara taken through a window. She was arranging. Wine glasses. Focused. Quiet. She looks nothing like Oleg, one of his men joked. Rurik didn't laugh. She has his eyes. He tapped the photo once. She lives small, works small, hides small. Good. The man nodded. Should we approach her at the restaurant? No, Rurik said. He'll be there. Drakov? Yes. Rurik's tone changed. Not loud, not angry, but sharper. The minute you step foot near her, he'll come after you. He's not reckless. He's calculated. He doesn't start fights. He isn't ready to end. So we wait? No. We watch. And when he slips, we take the girl. He picked up the folder and walked toward a reinforced door. Bring the file marked leverage, he said. One of the men grabbed it, handing it over. Inside the folder was a single page. Her name, her photo, her shift schedule, and a short note written in black ink. She is the deal. She is the punishment. Back at the safe unit, Alara sat on the couch again, hands folded in her lap, shoulders tense. Conrad stood near the window, phone in hand, face unreadable. A message from Jaren lit up the screen. Got something. Come alone. Conrad locked the phone. Alara, he said. She looked up at him with tired eyes. Someone tracked you through Crown Meridian, he said. They didn't show themselves. They didn't get close. But they were watching, waiting. Her breath hitched. Was it my father? No. Her heart dropped. Then it's Rurik, she whispered. Conrad didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. This isn't your fight alone. That's the problem, she said. It never should have been yours. Conrad didn't answer. But something heavy moved behind his eyes. He had already decided to protect her, even if she didn't ask, even if it meant crossing someone he never wanted to. Cross. 10 minutes later, he grabbed his coat. I need to check something, he said. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone. She stood slowly. Will you come back? Conrad paused at the door. His voice was steady. Yes. The door closed. Alara locked it, then slid to the floor, hands over her mouth, trying to quiet the fear pressing against her ribs. Somewhere across Chicago, a man was marking her name on a list she was never meant to see. And he wasn't just coming for a reunion. He was coming for an exchange, and she was the currency. The safe house had no clocks. That's what Alara noticed first. No tick, no countdown, just time floating, unmeasured. She didn't ask why. She already knew. Lately she had noticed that his silence wasn't cold. It was watching. It was learning. They hadn't spoken much that morning. She made tea. He read something on his phone. But the space between them had changed. Softer, slower. Alara sat near the window on the long couch, legs tucked underneath her. The sweater was his, too big, still carrying faint notes of cedar and smoke. Conrad glanced up from across the room. You slept last night, he said. No. She shook her head. Or I just don't remember them. He nodded once. Slow. You? I don't sleep unless someone else in the room does. She looked at him. You watching me? I'm watching what might come through the walls. Later, she found herself in the kitchen, humming under her breath, sleeves rolled as she washed a plate. It felt too normal, too calm. Conrad stepped into the doorway. He didn't speak, but she felt him there. I used to think safe houses were cold and empty, she said. He leaned against the frame. Most are. This one doesn't feel like that. He crossed the kitchen slowly. It's because you're in it. She paused. Water ran. Then she smiled a little. Small, quiet, the kind that disappeared as soon as it showed. That night, the air turned still again. But the silence didn't feel like distance. It felt like something was brewing. Alara curled on the couch, half asleep under a blanket. Conrad sat in the chair across from her, legs stretched out, arms crossed. They hadn't turned on the lights. Just the glow from the kitchen overhead. She mumbled, You always sit like that when you're thinking. He glanced up. Like what? Like you've already made 5 decisions, but you're waiting to see which one breaks first. Conrad didn't answer right. Away. Then he said, I've made 6. She smiled again. This one stayed a little longer. Which one's about me? Conrad stood slowly, crossed the room, and sat beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel. I already made that one the night you said, They found me. She looked at him, eyes soft. You always this steady? No, he said, but you make it easy. The next morning, Alara stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her hair. Her reflection didn't scare her the way it used to. She looked less like someone on the run, more like someone who had been found by the right person. Conrad was in the living room, reading messages. When she walked out, he looked up. I need to stop by the restaurant. He didn't speak. she added. Just to get my last check. That's all. He set the phone down. You think it's smart? No. Then why? Because I can't spend my life hiding behind walls, no matter how tall they are. He nodded slowly. You'll take Jaren. She nodded. You'll be in and out. She nodded again. He stood and handed her a jacket. 15 minutes. I'll be watching the street. Alara zipped the jacket, pulled her hair back, and didn't say thank you. She knew it wasn't protection she needed to ask for. It was space, and he was giving it. The restaurant looked exactly the same. Too clean. Too expensive. Too perfect. Jaren parked across the street and stayed in the car. Alara walked through the back entrance. Familiar sounds greeted her. Kitchen clatter, silverware, someone swearing softly over burned bread. As she passed through, one of the pastry girls, Dana, rushed up. Alara, oh my God, you're alive? The hug came fast. Alara froze, then let herself lean into it briefly. Dana pulled back. We thought something happened. I saw something on the news. There was a car and a chase, and I'm okay, Alara cut in. I just needed space. Quiet. Dana nodded, overwhelmed with relief. They said someone from the restaurant might have been involved. I almost called the cops. But I remembered how private you are and thought, I better not. But I'm glad you're okay. Alara gave a tight smile. Yeah, just laying low. Dana reached into her apron. I kept your check in the freezer. Figured it was the safest spot. Alara took the envelope. Thanks. As she turned to leave, Dana added brightly, So you're still around? In the city? Alara paused, then nodded once. Yeah. Still here. She left fast. Didn't look back. Across town, Rurik Malin sat in a warm office with a glass of tea, flipping through a folder. A phone rang once on the table. He answered. The voice on the other end was shaky. Young. Female. First, I wasn't sure if I should call, but I recognized her. Rurik didn't interrupt. She was at Crown Meridian this morning. Said she's still in the city. His eyes darkened. He smiled. Good girl, he said. Then ended the call. He picked up Alara's photo from the desk, tapped it once, then set it down beside a map. She's not hiding anymore, he murmured. Rurik didn't rush. He walked the perimeter of his office slow, hands behind his back, lips curved in that patient, knowing way he'd become famous for. He had time now, because she was in the city, still breathing, still reachable. He paused at the corner of the long table and tapped a small device beside the folder labeled Win. One of his men stood nearby, tall, older, wearing a dark coat and tighter eyes than most. She confirmed it? The man asked. She didn't mean to, Rurik said. But yes. He opened the folder again, spreading the contents. Photos, addresses, routine logs, and a new entry, handwritten, circled 3 times. Crown Meridian, pickup confirmed, local source. He slid the folder toward the edge of the table. I want 2 teams watching every block within 6 streets of the restaurant. But no one approaches her. Not yet. The man didn't question it. You want her scared? I want her cornered, Rurik corrected. Why not take her now? Because we're not only after the girl. He turned and picked up a second folder, clean, thin, with one name on the tab. Konrad Drakov. Rurik flipped it open, revealing a photo taken from a long lens. Konrad, walking out of the safe unit's parking garage, phone to his ear, unaware. We're also after the one protecting her, Rurik said. Alara climbed back into the car beside Jaren and shut the door. Fast. He looked at her, eyes scanning. Everything good? Fine, she said quickly. He didn't start the car right away. You sure? Alara paused. One of the girls saw me. She was excited, happy, just loud. Jaren nodded, started the engine. I told her I was still in town, Alara added. He shot her a look. On purpose? No. But I couldn't lie to her face. He didn't say anything. More, just drove. But Alara's hands wouldn't stop. Clenching. Her stomach tightened. She knew what she had done. Back at the safe unit, Conrad stood in the kitchen slicing an apple with perfect precision. He didn't look up when Alara walked in. "You were gone 17 minutes. I know. Was it clean?" "Not exactly." He finally turned. She dropped her bag onto the counter. "I told someone I was still around." Conrad didn't react, not with anger, not with alarm. He simply asked, "Who?" "Dana, one of the pastry girls. She connected you to anything?" "No, she just asked if I'd left." I said, "No." Conrad nodded once, slow, then went back to cutting the apple. Alara waited for the lecture. It didn't come. Instead, he said, "You don't owe me perfection. You owe yourself survival." She blinked. "Still," he added, "you just made us visible." Hours passed, but she couldn't settle. Not in the chair, not on the bed, not on the balcony. The city didn't feel far enough anymore. She stared at her phone. No new messages, but that meant nothing. They didn't announce themselves. They showed up. They closed in. She didn't know if Rurik would send a text, a car, or a bullet. She only knew he wouldn't forget. In his office, Rurik stood in front of a wall, sized map, small red. Pins marked territories, dead drop locations, past safe houses. A fresh blue pin stood out. Conrad's building. Rurik tapped it once. "She's not his problem," the older man said behind him. "She is now," Rurik replied, "and Drakov won't let her go. That's why we'll let him keep her." The man raised an eyebrow. "Until," Rurik smiled, "until the girl becomes the reason he bleeds." That night, Alara lay on the couch with the lights off, eyes open. Conrad sat nearby, scrolling silently through message threads. Neither of them had spoken in over 20 minutes. Then she whispered, "Do you regret this?" He didn't look up. "What?" "Helping me." He put the phone down and leaned forward. "No, even if it gets worse. I never expected better." She turned her head to look at him. He didn't blink. Neither did she. The city didn't sleep, and neither did the man waiting to make her suffer. Because to Rurik, pain was the most valuable currency, and Alara had just stepped into his debt. The estate felt wrong the second Conrad stepped inside. He walked in through the front door, expecting to hear the sound of the kettle in the kitchen or Alara humming off-key as she folded laundry. But the silence was heavy, the kind of silence that grips your chest and doesn't let go. "Alara?" he called out, scanning the foyer. Nothing. The living room was untouched. Her shoes were still by the door. Her favorite cardigan was draped over the arm of the couch. The back door was locked from the inside. Her phone sat on the counter next to the charger. His chest tightened. She never left without her phone. Never. Conrad moved through each room, his steps growing faster, eyes sharper. By the time he reached the guest room where she'd been sleeping, the sheets were ruffled, but the bed was empty. Her necklace, the one she always wore, was lying on the floor. He picked it up slowly as if it might explain something. It didn't. His fingers curled around the chain, and he shut his eyes for a second. His mind flashed to the guards outside. Had someone been asleep on duty? Had she left voluntarily? No. Alara wouldn't just vanish, not without telling him, not after how far they'd come. He marched outside, fury riding just beneath his skin. The guards stood by the gate, confused but alert when they saw his face. "Did anyone see her leave?" he barked. The taller one, Vladik, shook his head. "Sir, we haven't seen anyone come or go since morning." Conrad didn't yell. He didn't need to. One sharp glance, and both men scrambled to review the security footage. Conrad joined them in the surveillance room, eyes locked to the monitors as the day's reel played back. Hours of nothing. Until 2:37 p.m., a black SUV stopped a block from the house. 3 men in uniforms walked up to the door like utility workers. There was no sound on the footage, but you didn't need it. The tension in Alara's body was clear when she opened the door. She tried to shut it again. One man shoved his boot between the frame. Another lunged. She fought. The third one used something on her. Conrad couldn't tell what, but within seconds, her limbs went weak. They carried her out, stuffed her into the back of the SUV, and disappeared. Conrad stood frozen, jaw clenched, eyes locked to the final frame. Time stamped. 2:40 p.m. He didn't say a word. He simply walked out. He entered his office, locked the door, and dialed a private number, one he hadn't used in years. When the voice on the other end picked up, he spoke low and sharp. "Alara's gone. I need eyes in every quadrant. Trace the vehicle. Run city feeds. Call in the Moscow team. No excuses. I want a location in under 2 hours." "Yes, sir." He ended the call. Conrad sat in silence. His hands trembled slightly as they rested on the desk. He hadn't let himself feel fear in years. But now he couldn't think about anything else. Only the way her lips moved when she laughed, the way she'd looked at him that morning before he left, like she was finally ready to stay. And now? She was gone, stolen from his home, and he didn't know where to begin. Back at the warehouse, Alara was awake. Barely. Her wrists were tied behind her. Her mouth was dry, her head pounded. Across the room, a man she hadn't seen in 10 years stepped out of the shadows. Rurik. He looked older, meaner. The scar across his jaw wasn't there before. Neither was the cold in his voice when he said, "Welcome back, sweetheart." Alara stared up at him, teeth clenched, voice shaking as she whispered, "My father won't save me." Rurik crouched in front of her like a man inspecting damage on a vintage car. Alara's wrists were raw. The rope hadn't loosened. Her breathing stayed shallow, controlled only by sheer force of will. Her eyes didn't leave his face. He smiled like a snake warming under a lamp. "You remember me," he said. She didn't answer. His smile widened. "Good. It's better when they remember." He rose and paced slowly in front of the rusted steel table. The room was concrete, wide and cold. A single bulb swung overhead, flickering every few seconds. She shivered, but not from the chill. It was the scent, oil, damp wood, and blood not cleaned well enough. Rurik picked up a chair, turned it around, and sat directly across from her. Legs spread, arms resting on the back of the chair. "You know," he said, "your father was a proud man. He thought he could outthink everyone. He believed legacy meant survival. He leaned in. He was wrong." Alara kept her mouth shut. Rurik tilted his head. He made a deal. Then he broke it. He ran with money that wasn't his, with names, with codes, but worst of all, he ran with arrogance. He stood again, voice rising, never loud but cutting. "And he left you behind like a receipt he forgot to burn." She clenched her jaw. "My father doesn't care about me," she said flatly. Rurik turned back to her. "Exactly. That's why I didn't waste time calling him." He stepped closer. "I didn't take you to punish him." He leaned in, so close she could smell his cologne. Expensive. Familiar. "I took you because someone else does care." At that same moment, Conrad was tearing through the city with 2 SUVs behind him. Jaron drove. The team scanned the streets, watching traffic feeds through hacked, in surveillance taps from city lights and drones. Then came the update. A live feed. Warehouse district. Near the rail yard. Unregistered van entered 15 minutes ago. "Go," Conrad said. Jaron floored it. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Conrad's phone buzzed again. Leon's voice came through. "You sure she's alive?" Conrad stared ahead. "I'll let you know when I walk out with her." Back in the warehouse, Alara's lip bled. She'd tried to bite through the rope, tried to twist her wrists free. Didn't work. Rurik's men stood by the door like statues. But he stayed close. "You know, the funny thing is," Rurik said, circling her now, "you could have lived quietly, hidden, maybe even started over, but then you let him find you." He tossed a photo at her feet. Conrad, stepping out of a car, caught mid-movement. Alara looked down, then up, and her voice cracked for the first time. "You're trying to use me to draw him out?" Rurik nodded once. And it worked. He knelt again. Konrad Drakov, dangerous, smart, calculated. He tapped her cheek with the back of his hand. Just the kind of man I enjoy breaking. She glared at him, eyes hot with fury. He's not going to walk into your trap. He won't have to. He stood, then nodded toward one of his men. Let him come. Let him see. And when he does, Rurik smiled coldly. We'll give him something to bury. Alara sat back, heart pounding so loud it rang in her ears. But still, she whispered, you won't win. Rurik walked toward the steel door, looked back once. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Then, just as he disappeared through the exit, he muttered the words that locked the threat in place. No. But Konrad Drakov might. Rain poured like punishment, soaking Konrad's jacket as he stepped out of the black SUV, alone. No entourage, no backup, just one man walking toward hell with murder in his breath. The warehouse near West Garfield Park stood as a shell of rot and secrets. Rust dripped from the edges, puddles scattered across cracked pavement. His boots hit hard against the concrete, each step louder than the last. He didn't need to knock. He kicked the door open. Two guards barely had time to reach for weapons before Konrad dropped one with a punch so sharp it cracked teeth. The second tried to run. Konrad grabbed the back of his shirt, slammed him against the wall, and let him drop. No words. He moved through the hallway, senses honed. The layout was familiar enough. He'd used this place a decade ago for a deal gone wrong. Now it was full circle. He found her in the third room. Alara, tied to a chair, head bleeding, eyes locked on his the second he appeared. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. A sound shifted behind him. Rurik. The Russian stood with a crooked grin, gun drawn, eyes dancing with the glee of control. You came alone, he said in Russian. I didn't need more. Konrad's voice was ice. Rurik raised the gun. Step closer and I shoot her. Konrad stopped. Alara's breathing was shallow. Konrad saw her fingers twitch. Not fear. Focus. She was still with him. You don't even know who she is, do you? Rurik taunted. Your empire, your rules, none of it means anything now. This, he gestured to her, this is the price of loving someone marked. She's not marked, Konrad said, voice low. She's mine. Rurik aims at Alara. Konrad lunged. A loud crack ripped through the air as Rurik fired. Alara gasped, but not from pain. The bullet had missed. By inches. Konrad slammed into Rurik, the force sending them both crashing into a metal cabinet. The gun flew across the room. Alara flinched as it clattered to her feet. Konrad's fists didn't stop. He hit Rurik once, twice, each blow heavy with months of fury. Rurik fought back, sharp and fast, but Konrad was built for war, for rescue. Blood stained the floor. Outside, tires screeched. Konrad's men stormed in, Marek, Ivo, others, all masked in black and armed. Guns drawn, eyes scanning. Marek shouted, "Boss!" Konrad didn't stop until Rurik lay dazed. "Secure him," he growled, stepping back. Two men cuffed Rurik, dragging him up. His mouth bled, but he smiled. "You think this ends it?" Rurik hissed. "You think she's safe? Now?" Konrad walked up to him, close enough to whisper, "No one touches her again." He turned to Alara. Her hands trembled as Marek untied her. Konrad dropped beside her, lifting her gently, his voice barely a whisper. "You're safe." Alara buried her face in his chest. He held her tighter than he ever thought he could. Konrad didn't leave Alara's side for hours. After the warehouse rescue, his hands were still bloodied, his jaw bruised, his silence thick, but he wouldn't let go of her. Not even when she slept. Not even when she whimpered quietly in her dreams. They were back at the safe house. A different one now. Higher floor, fewer windows, more cameras, and this time, a code that only Konrad and his second-in-command knew. Alara stirred on the bed. Her skin still bore the faint red lines where ropes had dug into her. Her lip was cracked, but healing. Konrad sat beside her in silence, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. She opened her eyes. Slow. Careful. He leaned closer. "You're safe." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She just nodded and sat up slowly. "You came for me?" He didn't answer with words. He reached out, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. His thumb lingered there. "They hurt you." "I should've." "You did enough," she whispered, then added softly, "You made me feel like I mattered." Conrad stood, restless, pacing near the floor-to-ceiling window. "You do matter. You shouldn't have had to prove your existence to anyone. Not your father, not me, not anyone." Alara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Do you believe me now, about who I am?" He stopped, turned. "Yes. But that's not why I'm here." She tilted her head. "Then why?" He walked back, sat again. "Because when I thought I lost you, I didn't see the Empire, or the war. I just saw you." Alara blinked. "Once, twice. I don't know what this means, Conrad. We're from different lives, different laws. Then I'll rewrite the rules." They sat like that for minutes, close, breathing in sync. He leaned in, his voice softer than she'd ever heard. "You're not just a waitress. You're mine to protect." She closed her eyes, let herself lean into that truth. The knock at the door wasn't loud. It was firm, measured, and it froze the air in the room. Conrad rose instantly, gun in hand. Alara stood too, wrapped in a thick sweater. Her pulse picked up. That knock, there was something old in it, something she hadn't heard in years but would never forget. Conrad checked the screen. His body stilled. "It's your father." Alara's knees nearly buckled. He opened the door cautiously. Oleg stood there. Clean suit, pale blue eyes, no weapons visible. But danger radiated off him. "Can I come in?" he asked, like it was his house. Alara stepped forward. "Why are you here?" Oleg stepped inside without waiting for permission. Rurik was a shadow. "The real storm is coming. And I need my daughter alive for what's next." Conrad stepped between them. "You don't give orders here." Oleg didn't flinch. He looked past him. "You love her, don't you?" Conrad didn't respond. Oleg smirked. "Good. Then understand this. She's the last living leverage I have. And now that Rurik's gone, every man who ever feared me will come looking for the daughter they think holds my secrets." Alara's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Oleg turned to her, finally softer. "I'm saying your life, and his, just became the most hunted story in this city." She backed away slowly. "You're using me. Again. No. I'm warning you. What's coming next isn't revenge. It's eradication." Conrad's hand flexed at his side. "You should leave. Now." Oleg smiled. "I always did hate goodbyes." He stepped out, disappearing into the corridor. Alara stood frozen, her heart pounding louder than any war drum. Conrad walked to her, held her arms. "Whatever's coming, we face it together." She nodded. But in her gut she knew, this wasn't over. This was only the beginning.